Hello and welcome to the tutorial on freehand tools in Photoshop CS5. In order to open Photoshop, click on the Start menu, All Programs, Adobe Master Collection CS5.5, and then scroll down, select the 64-bit version of Adobe Photoshop if that one's available. In order to look at the freehand tools, we'll need to go to File and New, and I'm just going to select a preset International Paper A4 document with a transparent background. Okay, so I'm just going to click this down from the tab viewing format. I prefer it in its own window. Now most of us freehand tools are down the left hand side here. Some of them are quite obvious what they do, so we've got a paintbrush here. Now if we hold a finger down on this icon, we can also select a pencil, colour replacement tool or mixer brush tool. I'm just going to have a quick play with the paintbrush to show you how this works. So basically we can draw as if we would with a paintbrush, but there's a variety of different tips, so you're not just stuck to one particular style, okay, for whatever you might be doing, and you've got a variety of different sizes that you can select. Okay, now some of these can be quite useful for putting things like sparkles on elements, so a brush like this one with the right colour would put a nice sparkle on things, or a snowflake, something like that. So there's a nice variety of different bits and bobs there. You've got mode here, and there's a variety of different modes. I'm not going to go through all of these now because I'll look at these later on the gradient tool, because it's a little bit easier to see what they do. You've got the opacity of the brush, so obviously if you want a slight effect you can change the opacity, and you've got the flow of the brush, which is quite an interesting effect. Okay, so again the pencil tool works very similar in that it's just a pencil. Now we've also got a rubber, or an eraser as it's called. So if we click on the eraser tool, we can rub out what we've done. So that's quite self-explanatory. Quite a useful tool right there. Right, I'm just going to take my document back in the history palette and look at the paint bucket tool, which is just this one here. Now if we click on this, it fills a colour into an area, or if we were to draw a selection, it'd input the colour into that selection. Now we change the colour down here. We can select a different colour using the colour picker, and then click on the paint bucket again and create and change the colour. Now again, there's a couple of different modes for this, and there's opacity and tolerance. We looked at tolerance in the selection tool tutorial. And then if we click on the paint bucket tool, we should have a gradient tool as well. And the way this works is that you can select a gradient. There's some preset ones. Click OK, and then the line that you draw is where the gradient will be applied. So if you draw a little line, it'll draw you quite a fine gradient. If you draw a long line, it'll draw you quite a large gradient. And you can zoom out so that if you want to create an even bigger line, you can see how that works. Okay, the other thing that you can do with the gradients is that you've got a variety of different types of gradients. So as we can see here, we can apply circular ones. Okay, there's a variety of different ones that we can apply here. Now the other thing with the gradients, as we've seen before, is we can put points in. Okay, like we've done there, change the colours of them. So if I draw that in now, see how that works. Now also what we've got is a mode which we've looked at a little bit elsewhere. Now the really good thing about the modes with the gradient is that it's usually quite easy to see how that works. So if I go on multiply, you can see how we can build a gradient up on top of each other. There's other ones, so let's try colour burn. It's quite a wacky effect. Let's have a look at vivid light. It's quite interesting. So again, like with a lot of the tools in Photoshop, it's just a case of getting in there and having a good play about and seeing what you think, seeing which ones you quite like. So I'll move on because we don't need to look at all of those, but I'm sure, like I said, you can have a good play about and see how they work. There's also an opacity setting on here which we can change. So if we just create a very quick gradient, to give you an example of what we can do. And I've seen this used quite well in the past. let's just take it back to the beginning. If I go to multiply, see how you can begin to layer specific shapes. It's really useful as well if you're trying to create like an exact circle, for instance. This will give you one, and as you can see, before long you can start to create some quite interesting little effects. Whether that's of any use to what you're actually doing, that's for you to decide, but it's obviously quite an interesting little tool. Okay, we're going to have a look at a couple of other tools which aren't exactly freehand tools, but they are quite useful nonetheless. So if we go to the spot healing brush tool, go down to red eye tool, we can quite easily just draw a box around somebody with red eyes and we can correct that. So that's one that comes in quite often. Now another tool which we can use, if we just open a different picture up, is the clone stamp tool, which is really useful for cloning an area of an image. So if we zoom in on this picture of Will Smith, for instance, and select, it's got a little mole just over his cheek on the right. So what we do with this is we hold down Alt to select an area to clone, and then we click on the area that we want to apply the clone to, and that should give you the desired effect, which of course in this situation is to remove a mole. Now if we just undo that, you could go around it a different way. So let's clone the mole. It's not exactly worked, not a great clone just there. We can give him several more. As you can see, that's not worked exactly right because we've got a slight difference in skin tones there, but you can get the idea of how that basically works. Probably the second one's about as accurate as we're going to get. So let's just try in another area, maybe somewhere like that. Yeah. Okay, so that's quite a creative tool. Now obviously with your clone stamp you've got choice over how large the stamp is, how much of the area that it selects. So again, just have a good play about with it. Quite a powerful little tool. Get rid of little bits and bobs that you don't want in your image, and is a really simple way of just sort of airbrushing your images slightly. Also in your freehand tools, you've got the shape tool. Now this is really interesting. Let's just open another document. In your shape tools, you've got a rectangle tool, rounded rectangle tool, ellipse tool, polygon tool, line tool, custom shape tool. Now if we go to the custom shapes, you can see we've got a selection of different shapes here. We've got lots of different categories down this side. So if we want a film negative, you can put one of those in. And the great thing with the shapes, like with the text, is you can apply a layer style to them. So if I just apply a larger drop shadow, see how that works. Okay, that's really quite a useful feature. Okay, also in here you've got a couple of tools which could be quite useful. We've got the dodge tool. Now if we zoom in on these eyes, we should be able to just lighten them slightly, and this is quite useful for teeth as well. Okay, so again, very quick example, you know, not the best. It's gone into his skin a little bit rather than just the whites of his eyes, but you can see how that works. And looking at it from the other point of view, if you want to darken something, you've got the burn tool. If somebody's teeth are far too glowing white, then you can just tone those down slightly. Okay, you've got a couple of other tools in here. So you've got a blur tool, so that can be quite useful in a variety of different situations. So if I just blur Will's cheek, you can see we get rid of some of that the pitted look of the skin, which is actually pretty much how they do airbrushing, but we'll not go into that now. So it's just a case of having a good play about with these things, and before long you'll have got to grips with it. Thanks a lot for watching.